now. If you look at it, yeah, it's a little, you can just kind of see it. Anubis guy, he's holding his, but he's just like, it's a little misaligned. Even the big statues have that. Holy. Okay. I feel like it's going to be something that I'm just going to always like be reminded of every time I look at him now. It's going to be Hell versus Dan. Dan having to burn a trinket really early here, so for Hell, this gives an opportunity to do a lockdown onto the Paladino. Dan with a Hodge. Try to see if you can just make sure you get some mobility and some free dot damage onto Hell. Hell knows he needs to find a way to break out of the slows, land mobility, big burst. Is going to go for that sigil, try to go for whatever healing he can get. He knows it's going to be the shield of vengeance. It's eventually going to pop. I don't know if Searing does hit him. It does connect. Hell's health is actually looking a little rough. He's going to try to see if he can pick up some healing and go for full meta. Big burst maybe, backflipping out of there in case Dan goes in for lockdown, flying up in the air. Does Dan have enough mobility to escape? Hand of freedom and horse to rush behind the pillar, but he took a number of fell lances, enough to burn a bubble. Was Hell in like at an angle where you could keep lancing him? Because I feel like maybe if you're high enough in the sky, I don't think you actually get blindsided by the wall, actually. I could be wrong on that, but I think he maybe was just continuing to lance him, but he burned a bubble really early there. For Hell, he needs a lot of recovery. Stun went through by Dan. That's an opportunity for Hell to maybe pick up some healing. He's gonna definitely have to try to see if he can land a kill if possible. Dan is super low. Is that gonna be enough? Demon Hunter just needs a couple more hits. One more global. It is gonna be Dan fighting through this. Blessing of protection. Try to see if you can remove it. I don't think you can stop it. Maybe an immunity out of Hell. Sigil Spite. Dan unfortunately does get to juke out of it. It's gonna be darkness down together with blur. Hell just try to see if he can buy himself whatever time he can to survive. Does not have an immune, so you just try to see if you can maybe immune a Hodge out of Dan to win. That's all he can do right now, is maybe try to see if he can steal some of the souls from Dan. Let him stay on the ground, use mobility to catch up and pick up a couple of fragments. That's about all he can do right now. He does have a trinket, so the next stun out of Dan could be huge. He's going to go for the stun into a sigil. Try to pick up whatever healing he can, whatever passive damage, and whatever soul fragments that he can potentially pick up to heal up. Because those are his only way to heal right now. It's just little fragments here and there. Trinket out for Dan really aggressively. It's going to be Hell backing up out of there. It's going to go flying up in the air. Dan, he's gonna have to take lances and go behind the pillar. Not much you can really do. Still getting lance. Okay, it looks like at least one lance I think was already mid-air. He does need another one. Hell's health is super low. Next stun he can break out of it, but his health is just not looking good. He is gonna have to find a way to connect with Dan. Oh man, he set up a glaive, but Dan unfortunately had that dot damage rocking together with those judgments and range. There's just not much you can do as a demon hunter. You will just rot to a Herald Paladin. It is so tough. It is very tough. It is definitely rough, man, because he was in a situation where, like, even if he, like, because he had a trinket, but like there's nothing to trinket. Like the Paladin doesn't even need to go for Hodge. He just needs to go for whatever that range damage he's got and just finish it. Dan trying to see if he can possibly find an angle versus Call of Duty. That is a full incarnation that he's ducking away from, which is unfortunate. So we're fortunate for Druid. I like a Mog, by the way. I always like that helm from World of Warcraft. It was always a very unique piece of gear, just in terms of the looks. Definitely a unique one for rogues. Like really neat. There's going to be some dots out of Druid with a trees as well as a Fury of a Loon. He really needs incarnation. Like if he's going to see Dan out in the open, I think incarn and burst. Actually, I feel like if he didn't have incarn, that might have been the play. That might have been enough to burst him down, because he might have had resources for it. Try to see if he can get himself a stun. Shield of Edits out for Dan. He needs to find a way to peel Dan away from the pillar. And Dan is not going behind the pillar. Oh, no, now he is. Now he is. I was thinking Druid was going to try to keep him out in the open and then finish it off. I don't think a Dryad can do it, though, unfortunately. Unless Dan just dies to, like, Sunfire, Moonfire, Mushroom procs, and Starfall procs. Or Shooting Star procs. Which I don't think they do enough damage. Oh, trying to go for a rake stun, was not able to root out for Druid. Dan, does he have a Hand of Freedom? He does. Or he breaks out of that. Not with a Hand of Freedom. Blind, unfortunately for Dan, does not connect. He does give him a chance to go behind the pillar. Searing Glare also does not connect. Druid trying to knock him out in the open. This is where Dan is out in the middle of the arena. I am surprised Druid did not go in for a full incarnation trees there. I am very surprised, because Dan would have been in a rough spot. There he is, away from pillar. It is going to be a bubble. Dan waited out to make sure the bubble is back up and available. Druid needs just a little more pressure and Dan away from any pillars to end this duel right here. He could end it, but he's health. He's just worried. Wait, he's actually melting. actually melting. Roar, got himself renew. I think it's just over, right? I'm actually surprised. I thought Druid was actually ahead, but then Dan just went for a full Wake of Ashes, locking him down. Druid, bunch of damage into a full Dawnlight, and then Druid is just rotting behind the pillar, and now he's the one having to play defense until the hammers fly through. Oh my god. Looks like the hammer literally hit him from behind the wall, but it was technically midair before he routed the corner, unfortunately. And Dan, I don't know if he's got anything left here. Lay in hands, anything at all? I think it's lights. Stun, Salvador does go for the trinket to make sure you can just go for a quick execute. Or eviscerate, whatever. Might as well be a negative. And it's going to be Dan as the last one left over for that team with a full regen right now for Saya. This guy is going to give him what looks like proper honor duel. He's being super, super friendly though. Looks like he is going to give him a full reset. I don't think these guys have a major in their team. So Saya maybe can get a couple of heals. But that's really about it. Saya walking into this with just a bubble does put him in a rough spot. So for Dan, if this is as good of an opportunity as you can to win this, Saya needs to pick his battles, poke out, do whatever damage you can, back away, and he's going to have to do a lot of running. Because if Dan connects on him, all Saya has effectively is a bubble to stop a lot of the damage he's taken. Saya using Blessing of Saint in case there's CC. Blind, unfortunately, does not get hit by Blessing of Saint. That or does a little, but it's a very, very long lasting CC. For Dan, next time he gets a Hodge, this could be huge. Saya may just have to go for a bubble immediately. Shield of Endance ahead. Does he get to not send a bubble? Searing Glare, Saya can still play it very defensively. Hand of Freedom, and just trying to catch up as much self healing as they can. But as right now for Saya is knowing and learning how to trade the bubble perfectly. If you can do it at the right time, Dan with the full immunity right now will be the best time for you to commit the most amount of damage he's got, because you still have a bubble. If you can force a bubble out of Saya and then you use bubble yourself, next then it's going to come down to whoever has the next Hodge. And hopefully Dan does have it back up and available. Saya could get a Hodge out of a bubble out of Dan here. If your Hodge him right now, you get a bubble, Saya presses bubble. Both go for recovery, and then Saya is still at. Actually, Saya may be behind because then Dan has a Hodge. Now it's a chess match, dude. It's a chess match. Layered hands for Dan. Gets a Hodge on Saya. Saya with a trinket. Dan with a trinket. Dan stabilized. Saya's back up in danger. Maybe looking for a bubble. Dan's health is also low because Saya is no slouch with damage. Bubble out for Dan. Bubble for Saya. Dan is going to be behind on health. He just used lay on hands. Saya, I think, is a little ahead. I don't know if Saya has a Hodge. Whatever damage you can do to each other is going to be huge. Shield of Endance for both of them. Whoever gets the next Hodge wins, I think. It's really coming down to the wire. Could be anyone's game. Who is it going to be? It's just going to be Dan. Just it's a damage at the end. It's just a DPS race, and Dan does take it. Well done, well done. Like at this point, both Paladin. Paladin's top tier dueler. Right now, I mean, War Within, I think is definitely very, very good. Very good. I mean, Atha was doing like a bunch of duel competitions where people won gold as prize money, and he said it's really good for that specifically. Very, very good. Other classes are good too, but Paladin is a really good one. So depending who's in, like if you're decent with Paladin, you actually could potentially get like, you know, be the winner at the end of it all. Blind out into Mortalist does break out, make it with the dot damage, is going to go for a bit of that death pack just to give himself a bit more health. Dan locked down in the silence. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of riders to join that silence. And Mortalist is just going to back away, let those pets just do some passive damage to Dan, which is a decent bit of damage. Actually, if you can clone shadows from around the corner and get some death quills, it's also really, really good. It can do a decent bit of just chip damage. Definitely worth it, man. Definitely worth it. For Mortalist, though, I don't know if he's got... It looks like he should have army available very, very soon. If he has AMS, so he can just approach the end with AMS, that'll be ideal. Does get hit with a stun. No way to break out of the stun, unfortunately. That's a full Wake of Ashes for Dan. Blinding for a second. For Mortalist, this could be an opportunity for a full-on army. Together with the AMS, he should be able to get a bubble out for Dan, I think. If he's going to go for a full commit. It looks like he does go for Apocalypse. Silence to follow up. He has to drop down the A-bomb on top of it. I think he might, yeah, I think he might be able to go for it. He's got a lot of riders in. There goes the A-bomb, so the riders are in full play. For Dan, he will have to go for a bubble. Stunning those pets helps a little, but there goes the bubble. Mortalist just needs to survive long enough. His cheat death procs through, but it doesn't do much. Trinket's out for the stun. Needs a heal, but Dan able to secure that win. There's just nothing you can do against that bubble. Not much you can really do against that. With the anti going to be up next, immediately just... torrenting down Dan with a full burst. DPs are available. Nothing Dan can do in that situation. Spell, never mind. I stand corrected. Spell Warden is huge. Does go for a quick kick. Anthony's just gonna have to wait here a little bit. Yeah, with fear follow up though. But a blind up for Dan. And he's actually doing a bit of recovery. Okay, I was thinking for honestly, Ante was going to walk in and it was going to be easy shoe in. Does Dan have a lay on hands? You know, if Dan has a lay on hands still cooking in the back pocket, that's going to be unfortunate for Ante. Dan needs to land a kick, I think, maybe, or lay on hands. If you're going to use it now, that'll be time to do it. Shield of Vengeance, keeping it barely, dude. Oh, the Precipice is going to be a swap out for Ante. Forget him, let him melt. Let him melt. As a full stun out for Dan to win. Trinket out for Feral as he's just going to go in for some damage. Got himself a bit of the Tiger's Fury. Barkskin waiting out the Dawnlight. He's really just got to worry about the Wings and Dawnlight combo. Bear form, Heart of the Wild could come out, doesn't end up using it. I think that is the right play. And it's a stun. Dan, no more wings available. Trying to see if he can force stuff out of him. Big blaze, but it's a bubble to follow. Wall up for Feral. Still got Heart of the Wild rolling. So you just got to wait out the bubble. And then he can maybe potentially just make a play right then and there. I don't think he can go for a stun. Otherwise, I think he would have just run in there immediately. But the faster you go back in there before Bob or Lay on Hands goes back on, the better. Shield of Vengeance up. Stun onto Feral. Unfortunately, I think that might be lights. Unless you could barely survive. Yeah, that is rough. Maybe we should just give some like leeway for that pet AI in PvP at the very bare minimum. Right? At least just something to make it more consistent. Big hammers dropping. Armor to follow. The Anduin could just go bop us right now if he wanted to. I think for Blay, he got himself lots of damage. Quite a decent bit of recovery. Once he kept the karma rolling in, because he's perfectly fine with the hammer dropping in his head, just reversing the damage back to Danduin. But I honestly don't really know if he wants to be out in the open. I actually think he should have taken that time to just back up out of there. Does go for a port. Needs to catch up on a lot of healing. Vivifies are going to be crucial here. If you can just stay away from Danduin. Okay, spot. Try to see if you can maneuver around. Yeah, whatever time you spend, slide some witches to get out of the way. Okay. He does have Diffuse. He also has Conduit coming up very, very soon. So I think he's got a pre-diffuse here, possibly, versus any kind of burst. And maybe just go full Condi damage. He might just need to go full Conduit damage. No, it's over. Never mind. I was thinking you pre-diffuse just to reduce damage. Full Conduit to see if you can pressure Danduin down. Conduit will do a little bit of healing for you. Maybe that'll be enough. It's going to be Spell Ward and Druid back in that bear form. Just try to see if you can power shift. Try to go for Root Silence onto Danduin. But it's just absolutely muted. Big hammers coming through. It does have himself a second hammer as long as he gets resources. Bash for Druid. Switch it over to Bash though. I think instead of that a Mass Root, right? No, actually Mass Root and Ursal would be the ones competing with each other. I think it dropped a Roar for a Bash this time around. They did not nerf the hammer. What is this damage? Yeah, the hammer, I'm pretty sure they nerfed it a while back, but I think the hammer, if it crits, it still does a ton. Yeah, the hammer crits in particular is what does a ton of damage. Unless Danduin got some kind of like new attack with the hammer, I've been seeing the hammer making a slow comeback little by little. And I'm actually kind of okay with Pally hammers versus the Heralds. Lay your hands out for Danduin. Trying to see if you can just stay on top of Druid. Wake Match is coming up very soon. Searing Glare on the clone, that's so perfect! He actually wasn't able to stop it, but the root still held on either way. That was so good. Druid still got himself that pseudo clone either way. Was able to walk away from Danduin. Tried to see if he can get a landed stun. Was not going to be able to. Root escapes it blind. I don't think I was able to connect. If he has a stun for Druid, this is going to be huge right now. Mania summon. Massive hammer flows through. It's going to be a bubble. Does he have a second hammer? Second hammer does drop, but it doesn't crit. Yet another stun. Maybe another hammer ready. He's building up even more hammers. Little hammers eventually become a big hammer after you use it enough. Cyclone off of this one. Does have a human Rachel, but only breaks out of stuns, will not break out of a cyclone. Is going to be a little bit of damage from Druid. Does have that Fury of a Loon. No trees, no Incarn. Saving that for a little bit later. Actually might not be the worst for him. And Danduin does back up behind there in order to pick up a quick eye really quickly to make sure you can see Druid. He does spot him. He does see him. He should be able to get him out of stealth. Just let him sit in stealth there for a second. Stun. Big hammer comes through it. Does not land the crit. Second hammer can still do a lot of damage. Disarm. Can still land the hammer. Massive burst. You can literally see the health bar just dip. It does land yet another kill. And there it is, man. The big hammer damage falls through. Yulkin as an outlaw Worgen rogue just taking him out by Searing Glare unless you melded it. Unless he did meld it. Continuing this momentum onto Danduin. Jumping in the bear form as the stun comes out. It should be okay stabilizing here. Got himself. I'm pretty sure it's Renew, right? Unless I got it wrong. Root Silence on the Dan with dots rolling in. Meg just trying to go for a bit of that burst. Or a little bit of sustained damage rather. Does go for the Renew before Dampen to get super high. Entangling Roots unless you have a freedom for it. Clone right after. Do you Trinket? I don't think you do. I don't think it did. Looking very festive, by the way. I like the shoulders have to match the rest of the set. Got himself a big Wake of Ashes. You know it's going to be a stun, but Dan is going to have to find a way to claw back through that distance though. Swapping characters sounds good. So now Smirshkam. We will get Rune's Blade back in your group in a second. He is coming in to switch into a new character. So just letting you know. So you can maybe let the rest of the group know as well. It is going to be Max with a trick and try to see if you can just stay away from Dan. Being able to get distance from a Paladin for a Boomy is actually so good. And this might be a second Paladin under the belt of Max. He's got plenty of physical damage from the trees. Just needs to survive a lot of those bursts. Does not have Heart of the Wild. Maybe can go for Bear form. Maybe can land an interrupt onto Dan. If Dan goes in for a Searing Glare and you interrupt it, does go for a silence. If Dan is standing under it while trying to go for a bubble, he is not going to be able to use it. Regrowers are flying for Max, but unfortunately the pally damage at this higher damp at 27%, there's just not much. Second, perfect. As much of an auto duel actually wasn't a blast, but Shakif does survive and is able to keep on going with Dan doing Rin going to be up next. Give it Shakif. As much of an auto duel actually wasn't attacking immediately, not until she saw the Shadow Crash. So for Shakif, you could have maybe delayed it. Maybe need a Void Swap. I don't know if you could have used Void Swap or maybe Disperse. If you're gonna Void Swap, then Void Swap. I'm not sure what he was waiting for, but maybe he didn't think the Pally was gonna hit him hard, and then a hammer came down. That is the problem. I think a lot of people are so used to Pally's not playing the hammer build, and are just like, you know what? I've not seen Dawnlight. I'm probably okay. Hammer. Because if that thing crits, it's over. It is over. No respect? What do you mean no respect? What do you mean no respect? I was bowing. Oh, the Shadow Priest attacked you ahead of time? I mean, the Shadow Priest was looking for blood. He attacked Danduin, even though Danduin was giving him an auto duel. To be honest, Elo charges in, and Danduin does go for the hammer. Yet again, the hammer just keeps on striking over and over. Got himself a bit of that AoE, but Elo might be just lights here. Unless you go for immunity right here. Try to fly up. I don't think you're gonna win the DPS race. He just needs one hammer. He just needs one more hammer. Danduin, you better fight Sokovia though. I think he panicked, popped the shield. He was like, wait a second. I can just pop Elo like a balloon here real quick. And you may need some kind of... Rest in hell, he's waiting. He's waiting until he gets himself a proper go here. Where's the Dan? Try to see if you can spell steal, like, or at least remove a couple of soul fragments to maybe land a heal him. Then a couple of heals. Druid is not really rushing at him. Not really rushing at him. Is he letting him heal? Not really. Not really. I don't think Dan is realizing that Rest in Hell is picking up a couple of fragments to land a healer or two. Does go for a backflip stunner to Dan with the darkness to follow in case Dan goes for a Hodge. Blind instead. Rest in Hell blind breaks. Imprison onto Dan with a hunt to reconnect. Big burst damage to follow Dan with a lay on hands. Rest in Hell taking a bit of that Dawnlight damage, but he's got himself more Sigil of Spite. In order to get more soul fragments, 59% dampening, barely getting any healing out of it. Whatever soul fragments you can get out of Dan, that's going to be helpful, but definitely should be looking at a hit and run playstyle. Got himself an immunity with the first aid. He knows he's got to heal. Barely getting any healing, but it is at least helpful. Any healing you get is at least somewhat helpful. Stone onto Dan, backflips out to try to see if he can dodge a Hodge, flying up in the air. Danduin is down below. He's trying to see if he can find some cover. Oh my, if you poke around the corner, try to hammer him. That's a lance in your face. Nope, it's not. It's not. Resident Evil needs to live. He's trying to run. Trying to bail out. No, that's... Oh, no, mine. Probably died. Maybe not Beast Wrath, but at least like the big one. Hold on the while. Dan getting knocked out in the open, and he's kind of just waiting for Dan to get away from the pillar. Using a horse right now with Hand of Freedom in particular would be huge. Shrink it out immediately. Try to see if he can close the gap. Guerrero's using whatever he can. All the stuns, all the CC. With his pets and whatever souls he's got in order to keep Dan at a distance, and that's the best you can do is just keeping Dan at a distance. Those pets are actually doing a little bit of damage. Those pets are actually doing a decent bit of overall damage. Look at the amount of little rats he's got everywhere, dude. He's got so many little rats out there. Let's try to see if we can pull his pet back for a second. Dan tried to see if he cut across down the middle. Needs to find a way to close the gap and then go for a Hodge. Scatter immediately for Guerreros with the disengage. Try to keep the range. Blessing of Protection. If Guerreros careful, he could remove it. If he has Trank Shot. I don't know if he's running Trank Shot. Try to use it. Try to remove it. I don't think he was able to. Is going to go for a bit of burst. Turtle. I think it was expected for Dan to go in for full damage. Dan is close enough in order to possibly get a Hodge. But yet another disengage with a Binding Shot does help. Guerreros ends up getting a little bit too far away. Losing out on some of the damage you could have done to Dan. But for Dan, whenever Gore is behind the pillar like this, I actually think that's like the best time for you to cut across. If the pets ever give you like freedom to, you know, get a breather, but that is the best time to cut across to try to see if you can close that gap. Unless you just try to see if you can pick up the eyes ahead of time to try to see if you can counter a camo from Guerreros, which is not going for a camo. I'm just gonna go for food. Dan and Radimus left over for the team too. And Guerreros, I feel like Hunters don't really win fights against Paladins like this. Maybe like in a team comp, they could do really well, but like in a pure one-on-one, the only thing that's holding Dan back here is the fact that there's so much space between him and Guerreros, and the pillars are pretty far apart. So Guerreros can go behind the pillars, create some space, and then keep the distance. Dan is gonna have to use Horse and Hand of Freedom to, I think, try to see if he can close the gap. That or Hand of Freedom, then mount up, and then just rush over to Guerreros. Get close enough, pop a slow on him, and then go for a Hodge, full burn. As long as the Guerreros does not have like an easy out for that, yeah, that might be the play for Dan. If you could do it. He actually has no idea the Guerreros is that close. No idea the Guerreros is actually right then and there. So he's actually in a great spot. Binding shot, Guerreros is gonna have to use mobility in order to try to see if he escape. For Dan, there's an opportunity here to make something work. Unless you got a Hand of Freedom right now, he's gonna get slowed. Silence for outro. Finally able to close the gap. Just needs the stun. He's gonna go for the bubble. Hunter's right there. He's gonna be a trick it out for Guerreros. He needs to live, survive the bubble. Does not have a turtle so to counter the bubble. As an immune for an immune is going to be blind for Dan with an instruct onto Holy. I don't know if he's got lay on hands. If he has lay on hands, he's definitely going to have to use it. Using Shield of Venus to try to see if that'll be enough for him to traverse towards Guerreros. You got another Hodge. That would be ideal. Is going to Trinket. Freezing Trap breaks. Guerreros is kind of low. Dan with a lay on hands. I feel like Guerreros is just over. The Paladin, as long as they have just enough of traversal in order to just reach the other guy, they're going to be good. As Zed try to see if he can close in with a hunt. Is going to go for a bit of a backflip in prison for a second. Dan unfortunately doesn't have anything here at all. Hodge trick it out for Zed and it's over.